RWBY Ice Queendom Episode 4, I don't know if these have official episode names, has officially released, so let me break it down for you. So this episode starts off with RWBY having entered Weiss's dream alone. It seems Xion and everyone else had found Weiss's body and subsequently taken the necessary steps, as we witnessed with Team Juniper prior. RWBY is isekai'd into this whole new world with her redesign as a snowboarder. As it would turn out, iterations of all of Team RWBY exist within the dream world, so once the real version of them enters, two of them are effectively made. There was the original Dream RWBY, but now that real RWBY has entered, she's taken her identity. Everything within is of Weiss's perception or of the general idea of how she feels about someone or something. In RWBY's case, she's a snowboarder because I assume it's a very childish and reckless thing to do for someone of Weiss's class. I don't know, I'm spitballing here. So RWBY snowboards down the mountain and begins to see all the strange oddities plaguing Atlas, signs telling her to do a bunch of conflicting things that make no sense, along with the White Fang doing what they do best, robbing Schnee trains. And this is where I was like, oh, we're getting this kinda story, and I'm all for it. The White Fang all consists of animals. Of course, you'd expect that because they're all faunus. But they're not faunus. They're all straight up animal-like people. And seeing that, I was like, we're getting that kind of demonetizable word Weiss. The Weiss that genuinely sees the faunus the same as the Grimm. And I hope they don't hold back. As we would later learn, the inside of Atlas doesn't have any faunus whatsoever, so this may be Ice Queendom's attempt to tackle a faunus discrimination subplot as well. Maybe, I don't know, we'll see as it goes on. Anyway, despite wanting to do something, she's told to stay out of it and keep her head low. The White Fang takes down the train while RWBY makes her way into Atlas. The majority of the episode is spent getting us accustomed to just how things function in this twisted reality. Despite what many people expected, Weiss isn't quite the leader. Jacques' presence is still as strong as ever, as he is the face and voice of the Schnee Dust Company, which seems to have expanded far beyond what it did in the show and seems to be the main driving force for this kingdom here. While Atlas robots are seen patrolling the streets and seem to be under the control of the Schnees, the entire military system appears to be gone. Ironwood, the Aesops, pretty much any humans more closely associated with the military are all missing. But the technology remains. I'd have had more hope to see Ironwood if his concept art was shown, but it wasn't, so I have a feeling he's just not going to be part of this series. Also, Weiss's grandfather, Nicholas, jolly old Saint Nick, seems to have been made into more of a figurehead, almost a religious type figure. Everyone greets each other by saying his name. The humans, the robots, it's a salute followed by Big Nicholas. While creepy and weird, I think this may be a sign of respect Weiss has for him. While we've gotten next to nothing on him in the actual show, he's been portrayed as a really great guy that everyone loved, like Santa. And it's things like that I have a feeling I'm going to love more and more about this show as it goes on, because everything in this world is effectively its own psychological analysis on Weiss's mind and how she sees things. So pretty much anything and everything can be looked at with a closer eye. Anyway, RWBY's stealth mission immediately goes wrong as she's pegged as an intruder and slices down an Atlas robot. This leads to her getting chased, and we get a funny scene where Crescent Rose winds up shooting out of the wrong end. Turns out Weiss doesn't really know how RWBY's weapon works. She's able to escape by using a dummy and figures Weiss and the Grimm must be in the center of everything. But her path is blocked as unauthorized use of semblances is prohibited. But fortunately, she's given a hint which states she must travel the true path of all those who live in the Empire. And the solution, let me tell ya, is so comedically stupid in such the right way. I love it. To progress further into the Empire, RWBY follows a bunch of Schnee Company workers and just starts working at the factory. Like, this was your solution? Like, what was she thinking? Like, step one, gotta get a well-paying job, work up the corporate ladder, maybe get transferred to a new facility in 5 years' time, really make something of myself in this world. Like, she didn't walk into the factory to sneak through. She was working until she got bored. I love that type of silly decision. It's the type of thing she never quite did in the main show. Her decisions there always feel like they were morally justified, or it's the logical solution that someone should do, stuff like that. But here she really felt like a child who just went with the flow. She saw a group of people headed to work, she was like, yeah, maybe this is how I get deeper in, and just began working because everyone else did. And I'm really getting this childlike feeling from RWBY where she feels young and naive like she's meant to be. She even did the classic, I'm gonna jinx myself later on, when Shion tells her not to be careless with the coins because there's a finite amount of them. RWBY's response is the classic, I got a ton left, I should be fine. That's like, okay, you're clearly gonna get a little too careless and these will run out. But I think it's so much better for RWBY instead of, got it, I will be very careful in how I utilize these strategically. I like the more, it'll probably be okay attitude. Anyway. Upon leaving her job, she runs into Happy Klein, one of the 7 butlers inhabiting the Empire. It seems all of his original personalities were made into their own characters and make sure things work as requested. He's not quite a guard as RWBY yet again gets bored of his ramblings and makes her way further into the Empire. On her way to the dust shop, she runs into Dopey Klein, the jailer of all the sillies. That includes Team Juniper with the exclusion of Pyrrha, because Weiss respects her. That's pretty good. To make a weird situation even weirder, they're all meowing. Listen, I like to take my own character analysis away from situations. I like to form my own thoughts about what things mean and how they make me feel. I have no earthly idea what is happening here. I don't know the symbolism, I don't know the meaning, I can't even make something up. I've been baffled. For quite possibly the first time in RWBY history, I have been bamboozled beyond words and I don't know what to feel. So like RWBY, I'm just gonna turn around and say, okay, bye, and get back on track. So anyway, RWBY makes her way through the dust shop where she spots the residents of the Empire. In what is quite frankly a great throwback, everyone is shadow people. Though, unlike Volume 1 where that was a budgetary reason, these contribute to the eerie vibe going on. I don't know why they're shadow people, I know this is how Weiss views them, but what does that mean? What does being a shadow person entail? They're mostly just chatting shit the entire time. Maybe they're people Weiss doesn't consider herself close to, which would be insane because Willow is also a shadow person. So if this is a way to indicate Weiss feels no connection to her mom, then that's like, damn, that's deep. Speaking of Weiss's family, they're all here. Whitley takes the form of a bat. I don't know why he's that specific animal. His role is to effectively serve as a spy. I understand what they're doing with him in the sense that he, in real life, is always watching. He's observing, he knows what's going on, even if not directly in the thick of what's transpiring. So that's what he does here, he watches. Why a bat? I don't know. Winter takes the form of a book because, like Judge Dredd, she is the law. Willow, as stated, is a shadow person, but has got cake that could feed the Empire. Oh my god. And Jacques, he's kinda just the same. He's still a dick. But he's not goofy like the main show, which I really forgot while watching this. He was imposing. He was like a dictator. But anyway, when Weiss arrives in her mansion, she is debriefed about everything going on. Klein tells her about the White Fang, and Whitley tells her about RWBY's intrusion. But in this, we learn that the Blake within the dream world keeps showing up and causing trouble for the Empire. Also, by the sounds of it, this Weiss was also friendly with Dream RWBY, but is pressured to cut her ties and claim her throne as the heiress. I'll be honest, something that I wasn't expecting was for this evil Weiss to potentially be in the exact same scenario as real Weiss. The idea that she's being pressured to become someone or do things that she doesn't particularly want. It does make it possible for evil Weiss to turn sides, or it can potentially just be a true descent into villainy in what Weiss could have become if she truly keeps following orders. I hope for the latter, because it's not every day we're going to see a dictator Weiss. Real Weiss is still there and she's the good one. So let's just go full on evil with the other. That's what I say. But anyway, RWBY is having self-doubts but is reassured by Shion. While much of the place is bad and consists of hatred and lies, there is also good and truths within as well. It is RWBY's job to trudge through the river that is Weiss's dream and face it head on. This determination only lasts so long as RWBY is made wanted and is quickly cornered by Weiss herself. Weiss doesn't even need to draw her weapon because RWBY has been absolutely slaughtered by her drip. Damn, she looks good. The confrontation goes about just as well as you'd expect. RWBY thinks it's a good thing because she found her, and Weiss is evil. RWBY is sentenced to life in prison, and the two draw their weapons. I'll be real with you, while this scene was playing out, I thought the episode was just gonna end here. I thought Weiss was gonna draw her weapon and the episode was going to end, and the next one was just gonna start with RWBY having been captured. But as the scene kept going on, the music just never stopped. And at some point, I was just like, oh shit, this is about to be a fight scene. We've never had Team RWBY fight each other, and I was totally down for it. This is something I can get behind. And Weiss was dominating. We all know Weiss in canon. Her first fight win was in Volume 7 against Marrow. That was the first time she won. But here, she's rolling RWBY like a total badass. Unfortunately, the fight scene is short-lived, as RWBY's strategy was to run away and escape. While she tries throwing some decoys, it was all for naught, as she is cornered by Weiss and skewered in the eyeball, and both of her silver eyes are ripped out, and RWBY is now blind for the entire show. I'm kidding, the last part didn't happen. I don't know why cameras zoom in directly into someone's eyeball during an attack if they're not gonna get stabbed there. I presume RWBY is just captured, and that's when they'll send in Yang and Blake. While this episode really focused on RWBY, since she was the only one in, after seeing the White Fang, it made me think that this could very much also have a huge focus on Weiss and Blake more than anyone else. We know what Blake's design change looks like, and she is, like the White Fang, mostly animal. But she does retain a human face, so I mean that's a good start for a racist Weiss. At least she sees Blake as kinda human. But it seems like the White Fang and the Faunus are going to serve a much larger role. Once Blake enters the Dream World, she will take the identity of that world's Blake. And Dream World Blake is already a thorn in the sides of the Schnee Empire. They're aware of who she is. They know she's threatening the sanctity of the empire that they've built. So Blake is going to have a particularly hard time helping out Weiss with the reputation and pre-established lore that she's going to be in the made-up Dream World. But I mean, Weiss and Blake are a pair that haven't had much interactions in the main show outside of Volume 1. So if we're going to develop these two more, then I'm down to see what Ice Queendom does with them. But that's not to say I didn't have any problems with this episode. Probably my biggest gripe was the lack of explanation of how the world works. I'm not saying everything needed to be explained, but it seems like the brief synopsis we got while Jean was infected wasn't an accurate representation of what was going to happen. In the brief rescue of Jean, it made it seem like he's trapped somewhere and everyone has to find and fight the Grimm plaguing him. It seemed like a pretty simple, just go in there and fight the evil thing, which is technically true. But in this episode, RWBY's using this entire coin system. She started popping up telephone poles, creating doorways, dummies. She started doing a whole bunch of stuff with these coins without having addressed that this is a new mechanic that we're unfamiliar with. Can she do more than just these three things? Is she limited to this? What can and can't she do? It's good being confused. We want to be in RWBY's shoes because she has no idea what's going on. This whole new world and the twisted nature of it, they should keep the audience tied to her perspective, until we get Yang and Blake. Seeing that her gun shoots backwards is funny and something that was unexpected and you didn't know was going to happen. But if the character knows something, we want to be letting them know as well. Plus, there are more questions about how the world functions. RWBY at the start of this episode snowboards down the mountain like she's been doing it her whole life. And while I don't think snowboarding is particularly the hardest thing ever, are we just meant to assume this was a skill she always had? Or is she able to snowboard because that's how Weiss perceives her? Does this dream world give the characters skills and traits that they didn't have prior just because Weiss thinks it? And at the same time, are some of their skills taken away because Weiss thinks of them as inept in some ways? I feel like they didn't quite establish what was to be expected, what the world was really going to be like. So I'd say that was probably my biggest qualm with the episode. But it didn't make me dislike everything that was going on. I just had this feeling that I missed something as all these new things kept popping up. It felt like there should have been maybe one more episode. Overall, I'm enjoying the series. The sense of humor is much more up my alley. I love the way RWBY feels young and childlike. I can't wait to see how they're going to reveal more about Weiss through imagery and the world as a whole. I think this episode is where you really start viewing it as a new product. The first 3 episodes were very much a recap, so as the first official episode, I'm excited to see what's next. Anyway, moral of the episode is, when you're with Willow, it's wine and cake hour.